Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Smart Stage Day 2. I'm excited. I'm Jason Knott, editor of CE Pro, and I am excited to be moderating this discussion this morning that I think you're going to find fascinating and interesting. Transforming the lighting environment with intelligent automated shades. We all know how hot the shade category is. Motorized shades have become a key aspect for every integrator's business. The opportunity is growing even more due to a number of factors. Today we're going to run through some of those tangible takeaway factors, some of the great information for you to be able to use in your businesses and how to grow your shading business even more. So with me today are Margaret Block, Product Manager, Luxury Residential Shades at Lutron. Hi, Margaret.
Hello.
Is that working?
It seems to be working fine, yep.
Not that Lutron, people don't know who Lutron is, but tell us briefly who Lutron is.
Sure. So Lutron is the leading manufacturer of lighting control systems and certainly have been at CEDIA for a number of years and really introduced automated shading to the custom AV world. So really happy to be here.
Thank you. And also with us is Brian Anderson, Senior Product Manager, Lighting and Shade Division at Cyber Group in Scottsdale, Arizona. Hey, Brian.
Hi, nice to be here. Yeah, so Cyber Technology Group, we're a division of 95 professionals that are really passionate about what we do. And we are focused on the luxury real estate market in particular, serving high net worth individuals. So it's all about the experience for us. And we started 25 years ago, actually, as a startup, as a security company. And we've grown significantly into 4 divisions. We have a technology division, networking division, lighting and shading, and also electrical.
Can everybody hear Brian, or does he need to talk a little bit louder? A little louder. Hold that a little. You're Elton John. You got that mic right there. Okay. Let's before we jump into it, let's kind of the discussion. Let's set the stage a little bit on what's going on in the shading business right now. CE Pro, if you picked up, we have the October issue here. We did our lighting, or our shading deep dive, I should say, where we did some very interesting data on how pervasive the shading business is right now with the integration community. And the numbers are very interesting. 31% of all projects over the last year that integrators did had at least one shade in them. So it's just, you gotta look at it 2 ways. Almost one third of all projects had a shade, or boy, there's a big opportunity to bring shades to those other projects that don't have them at this point. The average shade, or the average project had 10 motorized shades in it. So, and then the average price per installed shade was $1,625. So let's do the quick math. That's $16,250 more for the project if you're able to get shades in on average. So it's quite lucrative. It's why it's, I think, one of the greatest categories. And I will say this: we survey all 40 some odd different categories in CE Pro, and this category had the highest predicted growth rate for the next year amongst integrators, 13% growth. So it is a very strong category. You're not too late to the game if you're not already doing shades. Just show of hands, how many people are doing motorized shades? Good. All right, let's jump right into it. All right, Margaret, Lutron first introduced shades to CEDIA about 20 years ago. That's amazing, 20 years ago. The category's grown so much. Where are we today and versus when we first started with automated shades?
Yeah, it's 20 years ago, it was a very different space, right? When we were introducing automated shades, there weren't a lot of shades out there. The idea of automating all of the shades in your home, be it a luxury home, it was almost unheard of. It's a very different world, right? When 20 years ago we had Savoya QED, so that was a quiet electronic drive, and at that time, our differentiator was trying to make the shades that are going into a luxury residence truly, truly quiet, so really not disruptive, and that's what folks are looking for in that space. And it's come a long way. I mean, shades is a huge part of our business. When we introduced this to custom integrators, we were here in the world of low voltage lighting, right? Low voltage lighting controls, and making custom integrators, successful with that category. And so we looked at it as how do we take low voltage shading and make them successful in that space as well. So it really comes down to, a breadth of line, high quality products, and really a base of education.
And you're seeing some of it here up on the screen. The category is not just singular shades anymore. Tell us how diverse this microcosm or the shade category is in terms of what integrators can bring to bear.
Yeah, I think many of you probably understand this. In your world, right? In our world, our customers, the luxury homeowner, they really value choice, right? That's so important to them to be able to see the different fabrics, textures, shade styles. And then in your world, you value flexibility, right? It's really important that no matter when you're on a project, you still have a bunch of options at your fingertips. And, I always say when I talk to new integrators or new dealers that it's always ideal when you get in early on the project, right? At the design phase, the walls are open. You can have so much control over what types of solutions you put into the house, right? But that's not always possible, right? Sometimes the interior designer comes in and changes their mind at the last minute, wants to add motorized shades because something changed about the interiors, or you're just doing a simple renovation. I think the study that you're referencing mentioned that 48% of projects last year were new construction, right? But 35% were existing homes, right? Think of that opportunity when it comes to something like a battery-powered shade where you can't get wire anywhere, right? But you can still offer that really, really nice solution easily and flexibly. And that's kind of what we think about in terms of breadth of line, both power, style, materials, the whole portfolio.
Let me add to that. It's not just windows, skylights, doors. There are other elements in the home that can take shades also, motorized shades.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really just bring that daylight in. Because that's how, we were talking about this. That's how Lutron thinks about this, is it's creating the lighting environment in that home, right? It's not just about putting a shade in that goes up and down. It's really how do you transform the lighting in that space? Artificial, natural, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a full breadth of line to choose from, right? We have successfully implemented battery solutions in our projects, and that's because either the house was existing or because we couldn't get in there early enough to do a really custom solution. So it's so nice to have a reliable source that, I can just peace of mind, I can put the battery solution in there in those applications and still have a satisfied client and not have to worry about it.
So Brian, let's go back to, when I first introduced, I don't know if you caught that he was the head of the lighting and shade division for Cyber Group. Your company's created a full-on division just for lighting and shades. Tell us about what led to that decision and why you did that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're all about the experience, and we really saw a need for a complete solution, someone to really own that process. You've probably heard a story or been on projects where that got kind of messy with shades. Typically, the old scenario is basically there's an interior designer, right? She specifies something, perhaps she even sells it, and then an electrician comes in, wires it, and then another guy comes in to install that for the interior designer. All this, think of the timing, right? They're installing shades when? At the time, right before the client moves in. But now the builder's stuck with juggling all this. Was the pocket set up correctly? Who was doing that? It turns into this pointing fingers at each other, right? And then as integrators, all those parts and pieces land on our lap to make it work properly. And when it's broken and it doesn't work, they're not calling the interior designer to come fix their shade. They're calling you as the integrator. So you really saw the value in that to create this dedicated shading and lighting division solely for that reason, is to really own it and to create a unique experience for our industry partners and our clients.
So let me ask you a follow-up on that. So having that dedicated division, do you feel like that's not only put you in better position with builders, but also architects and designers?
100%. Yeah, really focusing in on actually a key dedicated team that does this. That's all they do, actually. We have install teams, that's all they do. We have programmers, that's all they do. We have a design team, that's all they do for lighting and shade. So it's really been a value add for us.
So for the integrators who are watching this, what is the key to success? What has been the key to success for Cyber Group in this category?
Well, we started this 7 years ago, this journey, and again, it was all about the experience of trying to make sure that we're bringing a whole solution and thinking of it in a different way. And so when we created this division, it was changing the way that we thought about the devices that we're selling. We've always done lighting control, and now we're integrating shades because we're controlling the artificial and natural light. We're completely balancing it, right? And so we're now talking about conversations of lighting control. How are you going to function this? What about this glare in this large, massive living room? And then we're also controlling the lights in the ceilings as well to create this perfect curated content for them, for the perfect light at the right moment.
By the way, I should have mentioned, we want this to be interactive. If we have a microphone here. If you have a question, it'll be my cue to see you get up. Just get up and stand at the mic, and we want to take your question. So if you have a question, don't hesitate, get up to the microphone, and we'll ask you. Okay, so Margaret, we kind of did a quick poll of hands on how many people were already engaged in the shading space. If an integrator isn't in the shading space, how do they get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, Brian, you said your company really jumped right in, right? You're on these projects where you're already thinking about lighting control and thinking about how to design that light in the space, right? You're thinking about the zones of light that you're setting up, the scenes. Maybe it's a entertain scene, during the day, and you're thinking about under cabinet lighting and making down lights nice and dim for that event. But then all of a sudden your windows are open, and it doesn't matter how much time you spend on those, curating those scenes. So certainly an important category. But if you're thinking about getting into this category and you're on projects maybe where you're seeing someone really make a lot of profit on the project with the category of automated shades, you can do what Brian's saying, which is, really jump right in, get started with some training, learn about the category, and even partner with folks, right? Like if you bring it up on a project and you're not quite ready, work with someone on the job, right? There are all sorts of folks that, have decided to establish entire departments kind of around this category of lighting and shading. And it's really, easy to kind of, make a sort of a finder's fee, right? Partnering with these companies. If that's not you, there are several integrators that I've talked to that say, we offer a certain level of service. We want to maintain that relationship with the client, with the designer, with the builder, whoever you're working with. My recommendation is start off slow, right? Like take a project that you're already in. Let's say you're putting up a TV, maybe you're putting in some speakers or kind of setting up a nice viewing experience in the family room. Just talk about it, right? Like adding 2 shades in a living room, how do you think that would change and impact your viewing experience, right? And so when we think about our category and how we're bringing new custom integrators into the shading world, we think about simplicity, right? So certainly battery shades can go into a whole home, but battery shades are also really easy to install, right? Like a simple rail, 2 screws, it snaps right in, it all comes as one piece. Like, especially in existing homes, the windows are fixed. You don't have to worry about things changing and worrying about the risk of measurement. Like taking it slow kind of gets you comfortable with the category.
Let me have a follow-up on that, because I know I've talked to so many integrators who they have mismeasured. Mm-hmm. So how important is there a skill set or a training set that's just really necessary, because you don't want to end up with an inventory of unused shades because you mismeasured? That's
right, a bunch of ill-fitting shades for your house, huh? So that is, I think, the biggest risk factor that people are concerned about when getting started. And so that's where we actually focus. I mean, we have an entire training program that's dedicated to getting folks like yourselves started with this category. So we do measurement exercises, we do installation exercises, all centered around how to be successful there. And in this category, I mean, in anything custom carries risk, right? Especially at price points that are more on the premium side. So it's really all about becoming comfortable, educating yourself in the category. You told me measure twice, cut once, right? Make sure you're confident in that. But also you do learn as you go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You just need to get started with it. And battery solutions are a great way to get your feet wet if you haven't done that. But really, there's risk in everything, right? And it's just something new, something different in this category that you'll get used to it. But Lutron offers extensive training to help dealers get a startup, know what they're doing, so that they can be confident in the solutions.
Brian, let me go back as a follow-up to the earlier question I asked about working with designers in this category. What are the specifics of how you delineate the responsibilities there? I mean, we have so many fabric choices, we have fabric color choices, we have types of shades. Where is the decision-making process that you've determined that works best when you're working with the designer? What are you allowing them, or I say allowing, it makes it sound like you're in control of the whole situation. How are you partnering with them to on their choices that they can make versus what you need to do?
This is a very important question. As integrators, we're used to talking about tech, right? We're all about the gear and talking in that language. However, just because there's a motor in this shade and we can do a logic behind it for programming to make it cool and interesting, we have to recognize that this shade is now entering into the design aesthetic of the house, right? And so we need to be respectful of that. So if you're talking to an architect, they're going to be very much concerned with how it fits and forms into the building, maybe what that exterior facade is. If you're speaking with an interior designer, they're going to be very concerned with how it feels. And either way, that question is actually difficult to answer because I've found over the years that everybody's experience is a little different. You might be engaging with an interior designer that has a lot of experience and she'll tell you exactly what she wants you to do, which is awesome. But then on the other side, you might be working with someone that has little experience and they'll recommend a fabric that literally won't work for the application. So knowing the product level and really guiding them through that process is key. But really, what's fundamental between these two professionals is they're really focused on making sure the preservation of their design intent is intact. And when you enter the shading world, when you enter automated shades, window treatments is such a big part of the design aesthetic of a home. It can drastically change the way it feels. So it's really important to recognize that. So what I found to be helpful is when I'm entering that, I ask questions. You know, I ask, hey, what is your preference, right? Do you like texture? Do you like, is it a more minimal look you're going for? And I just kind of get a feel for what the style is of the house. I look at the window sizing, so I know, like, okay, are we dealing with really large windows, really tall windows, and so forth. And then I actually go to them with a curated selection of fabrics. I found this to be beneficial because really, one, it's kind of narrowing the options for them. It's less intimidating. But second, I know that those fabrics that are out on that table for them will work no matter what. And I can have confidence in that. And Lutron actually is really cool with that because there's an online quoting tool. You just plug in the information, narrows that search for you. So if you're getting new into shades, it mitigates that risk a lot. So it helps us to be more proactive in guiding those situations.
Yeah, just as an example, I know when we were speaking earlier, you'd mentioned that the designer could pick a fabric that may not fit on the roller shade or that would require a different size motor due to the weight of the fabric. So there are permutations that are important that they may not be thinking of when they're trying to pick that fabric or type that goes for the shade.
Exactly, and again, your name's on it, you're owning it. And so if there was a fabric selection that won't work for that and you go install it and you're unaware of that and there's smiles in the shades or something, the client's calling you for that. So it's very beneficial to make sure that you know those limitations of how big you can go, what the fabric can do. But in all reality with all this, it's all change, right? We're integrators, this is CEDIA, and nobody really likes change at times, but there's tools out there by manufacturers that you can learn and you can be successful with what you're doing and set you up. And Lutron, for example, they have a great program. They have an online quoting tool that I mentioned, a huge selection of library details. So if you're getting questions asked to you and you don't know how to answer that, you can just go to these libraries, you can pull up these details and you can kind of figure it out and get the answer. And then thirdly, the trainings that they offer, both sales and from a tech perspective. So like, how do you measure? How do you go through all that? So, yeah.
Elton John, remember, hold it really close. Just so I want to make sure everybody can hear you because you're saying great stuff. All right, you touched on it a little bit of how you have that first conversation with the designer. You're looking at the floor to ceiling, the type. You're talking about the shape. How do you open that conversation with a customer? Is it just an analysis of the architectural plans? Do they, in many cases, even know that these are an option, that they can have these? How do you start that conversation?
So there's a couple of things I do. One, if it's depending on who I'm talking to, If it's an architect or a general contractor, I'm starting these conversations early. A shade is the last thing that's getting installed before the client moves in, or they're already living in the space, right? And so to make this a whole connected, integrated system smart and actually go with the design aesthetic and everything and really look awesome, it takes a lot of planning and preparation on the front end. And so I'm really engaging these architects early and making sure that they understand the importance of that. If we execute this design like this, we got to start early. But then the other portion of it is where we tie in this lighting solution of our shade division and lighting solution. So we're not thinking of this as just a window treatment or just a shade any longer. It's part of an intellectual part of the entire lighting system, right? And so when we go in and we're talking about a house and what zones we're going to control for the lighting control, we're going to bring up, hey, there's all these windows here. Have you thought about this? What happens when it's, the sun's coming in? What are you going to do with that? And we just start talking and having conversations with people. And that oftentimes leads to things. In this category, everything kind of cross-pollinates. So if I'm working on an architectural lighting design, I'm already being proactive. I'm going in and I'm looking at the orientation of the house. What are the exposures like? What time is that sun going to hit the TV on in the master bedroom and that sort of thing? And I'm thinking about those and I'm being proactive and I'm actually inserting that information there and helping them to see and think of this as a total complete solution of balancing the artificial and the natural light.
So Brian brings up something there, that balance of artificial light, which Lutron obviously is also engaged in lighting fixtures. I'm sure many know here, but talk a little bit about where Lutron is involved in both categories, not just the shading category, but how this melds into also light, artificial light.
Right. And like I said at the beginning, we think about this in terms of how you're managing your total light experience, right? It's all about creating that light in the space. And so that is a combination of daylight and artificial light. And, I'm sure many of you know, we have fully tunable lighting fixtures and control systems like Ketra that really allow us to curate that light no matter what. And I think what's really magical is actually when you put a light source like Ketra into a room that has access to daylight. We were talking about this earlier, with things like natural show, with the tunable light where you can actually match the color temperature to the exterior. That is so powerful when you actually have access to that daylight, because it basically acts as an extension of daylight further into your room, right? So if you have darker hallways off of a main living room, or you're just really trying to brighten up that space, it feels really natural, right? I don't know if you've done that before in any projects.
Absolutely. In my market, where it's mostly desert architecture, modern architecture, we have floor-to-ceiling glass windows, large expanses, facades of glass, and really being able to pull the natural light in and make that continuous and feel the outside into the house is very powerful. And that's actually where Ketra is very powerful in that sense of really bringing the outside in and making everything cohesive.
Yeah, and I think the next step into that, right, you talked about intelligence, right? And I think that's another thing that we focus on a lot and that we try to make really accessible to integrators like yourselves is how do you not just program a shade to go up and down, because that's pretty basic, right? And it's nice to be able to do with remote control, but when you add it into an entire system, you were talking about how you actually measure where the sun is and when it clears the rooftop so that you can actually create this beautiful experience as an entire curtain wall of shades opens, right? And that's how we think about it too. When we have things like natural light optimization for our wood blind, it knows where that position of the sun is. It knows when it's going to tilt the blinds to optimize the light coming in. It knows when to shut that light out. And that layer of intelligence, you were telling me about some of the integrations that you put into your systems that really make shading and lighting super magical to a homeowner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's no different than what we do as integrators, is we're thinking through what the client wants and needs before they even think they realize that they need it, right? And so that's where we get to be, it's really fun to think of those areas. The most common is probably like what you said, is make the shades go up and down on their own without them even thinking about it. So if the sun's penetrating in the western exposure, we'll take those shades down, bring them back up in the sun or in the sunset, and The other areas is like, say we have a door and the shade's mounted above it. We do logic so that when the door's open, it's not going to damage the shade. We're also getting into voice control, where if we're in a multi-functional room, like a kitchen or something, and you're washing your hands are dirty, well, we can just tell the system what to do. But there's a lot of little tricks. It's all about curating the space, making that experience, and that's how we add value to our customers as integrators. We know what they're going to need before they even realize it, right? And that's when the magic actually happens.
Let me ask you something that we hadn't touched on. We've been talking a lot about the control of light. Does the privacy conversation come in light when you're talking about shades, or is that really a secondary concern of a customer?
That's a big conversation, 100%. So it's everybody's a little bit different, and the word privacy I have noticed that everybody's definition varies. Some people's privacy, they can put a 3% shear in a master bedroom, and I'm like, you sure about that? But others, they want total blackout. So really understanding the vocabulary of this category is very important, because without that, you can't set the correct expectation. And then if the client and you are not aligned on the expectation, it's a fail, right? So really understanding what those limitations are and kind of guiding through that is very key to success.
All right, so we've talked a lot here. Let's talk about what that first step is. Margaret, what's that first step that an integrator needs to do to get into the shading business?
Yeah, so if you're interested in getting into shades, I mean, you can kind of see, I mean, awareness for this category is absolutely exploding, right? We've seen this over the last couple years, certainly in the data that your survey showed as well. I think the first step really is to start talking about it, right? Talk about this with your clients. Talk about it with the homeowners and designers that you're working with. I mean, many of the integrators that I've worked with over the years started small, and automated shades has become, over half of their business, right? It's an extremely profitable category. And it's just a matter of talking about it with your clients and then starting slowly, learning about the category and getting training. I mean, we had a shades training here yesterday where we focused on our battery-powered line, our really simple, easy to get started with portfolio of products. And a lot of people are really interested in getting started. So it's just a matter of reaching out. Come visit us at the Lutron booth. We'll talk to you about how to get it going.
Yeah, I would say the same thing is just it's all about the conversations. When being observant to when you're walking a house, look for those opportunities and just talk about it. That's all it really takes. But as you're talking about it, you're building this thing and you're igniting that fire over here. On the other side, you need to be learning about it and being committed to that category. And then here at CEDIA, there's a ton of different manufacturers. There's professionals here that can really help and teach you what you need to know.
Yeah, to your point, Margaret, I recently spoke with an integrator who's a very big Lutron dealer. 70% of his business is now lighting and shades. Audio and video has become almost an afterthought to his
amazing.
business. Yeah. So, all right. Any questions from anybody? Yes.
Hello. If lighting has such an impact on the feel of a home, why is it not being managed by the interior designer or the architect? Why is it falling to you or an integrator to? Why is if lighting is such an impact on the home, why is it falling to you instead of the interior designer or the architect to manage it?
That's a good question. So lighting, when we step over to the lighting world, that is a whole science of itself. Architectural lighting design is a profession. Architectural individuals, they study it. However, they don't know it through and through, nor does a designer. They're more well-rounded with the decorative fixtures and that sort of thing, but really honing down on the controls. The systems are so complicated today. It's not just a switch on the wall any longer. There's dimming compatibilities, there's flicker rates with LED lighting, there's placement of the light fixtures to make it artful intent to make sure it really accentuates what you're doing. So it's not just putting circles on a plan, and it's not just a switch on the wall. That's very simple, but long gone are those days. Now everything is intelligent. Catcher light fixtures have to be programmed. They're addressable. Who's going to do that? So really developing that roadmap and a true set of plans is key for that, because then everybody, the electrical contractor, the job can get bid correctly and have the set right expectation.
All right, we are out of time. I want to thank Margaret, thank Brian, and thank you for attending. And hopefully you learned something that you're going to jump into the shade business and really get going on it. Thank you for attending.